Thursday, May 11th of our Grand Blanc Township Board. And with that, we'd like Mr. Guzak to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we're starting to use our technology here a little bit this evening, so we have a few bugs to work out, but we're going to attempt to have the agenda on the screen, and we'll perfect that as we move through our meetings, but we're going to be getting a few kinks out tonight out of some of the technology. So with that, I'd like to first of all ask for approval of the consent agenda before we move to the approval of the full agenda.
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving to the regular agenda for our meeting. Is there a motion for approval of that agenda?
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second, and that's an amended agenda, gentlemen. There are items on the back that were added since Tuesday.
So there's a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay,
Who said no?
I did.
got one opposed.
All right.
Okay, going to citizen comments. We'll open the floor for public comment at this time. Anybody care to make any comment? We have a brand new microphone, Mr. Erk.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. And we have quite a few minutes to approve, so I don't know if you want to do them individually. We'll entertain a motion to either do them individually or as a group.
I make a motion to approve the group of minutes listed under here: April 13, April 13, April 25, 25, 25, and 27.
Support.
Okay, motion and support. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving down to future positioning. The board will discuss topics presented in the joint meeting on April 27th between the city and township regarding fire department future operations and funding. And I think we have with us Chief Burdett tonight. And there was a city council meeting last night where I believe the issue was discussed, if I'm not mistaken, Chief.
Yes, it was.
Okay, anything that you wanted to share with us from that meeting, or?
It was an eventful meeting, I'll say that. There was quite a bit of discussion about the fire department's funding. Treasurer Carl Heiser and myself asked for a series of questions to be presented to us prior to the meeting so we could be prepared for answering those questions. A copy of those questions were forwarded over to Mr. Ligeta, along with the responses and also the updated spreadsheet for the vehicle replacement or capital asset replacement sheet. It was just a very interesting meeting. Like I said, a lot of conversation. That's what we've commented right now.
Okay. Any thoughts since our joint meeting? I know one of the things that we discussed a little bit about was the possibility of having a few task force to look at a variety. Do we want to talk about that at all, or Mr. Lehman?
That was brought up at a meeting, and
Okay.
The mayor declined our offer on that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So they don't want any task force?
They do not want any specialized task forces that would take the process, break it down, to come back for the June 26th meeting. They felt that their regular meetings, they could handle everything. And if they needed to talk about it, they could contact us and we could meet with them.
Just for the board's information, one of the things that Mr. Heiser, Mr. Burdett, and myself talked about after the meeting was the idea that if we wait until June to have any more discussion with the city, it's really going to kind of put us behind the eight ball for coming up with a millage question by the end of the year. And so our thought was, since there's a lot of ground to cover, whether it's capital equipment, whether it's looking at the future growth of our city and township, if it's looking at all the different facets, personnel, looking at each of those individually, and maybe assigning a city council member as well as a township board member or two, and discuss each of those things, and then bringing them back to our board so that when we meet again in June, we have a running start and we're not just continuing on from our previous. We thought we'd be much further ahead, so kind of surprised that the mayor would be against doing that.
We were also.
What's that?
We were also very surprised at that.
Yeah, so we'll have to have some discussion with it. Yes, Ms. Lane?
I was at that meeting, Mr. Chairman, and it was the consensus of the board, not just the mayor, that they felt they had sufficient meetings going on already and having separate task force. So I think they're up or willing to have an interchange of any information we want to share and send it back and forth to be dealt with at their meetings, rather than having staff and city councilmen schedule more meetings into their schedules.
So they think they have too many meetings, is what you're saying?
They have more meetings than we do.
They only meet once a month?
They have committee meetings.
Okay. Well, their council only meets once a month. But anyways, okay, any questions?
Yes.
Sir?
For the people that attended, I guess, were there any concrete follow-up or next steps related to this if they didn't do the task force? Was any plan outlined?
There wasn't anything planned or outlined, other than they did give me some requests for additional information pertaining to vehicle life, how many departments in the area, sustained our equipment over 20 years, the equipment maintenance, as the vehicles age, how much of the repair costs are increasing, the spreadsheet that was handed out for the capital expenditures. I admit that I'd made an error and it was caught, which is fine. They didn't realize that was going to increase the capital expenditures that we have to have on an annual basis. It went from 368 to 405 now. So, but other than that, that's all the directives that we received or what we were asked to come back to.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Lehman, and then Mr. Massey.
I think before you should all see a spreadsheet, and that was provided to the city council last evening by one of the council members. Bob did send it to me, and so I printed out a copy and gave it to you guys. I also sent it to you electronically. But you can see that they did take a little bit of the breakdown to look at the funding, less expenses. Also on the bottom of that spreadsheet, I noted that they assume with one less full-time position, although they were inaccurate in the wages, they used 38,000 instead of 45, which would skew this data. But this is exactly how we got it. I forwarded it to you, and it on the top half they show if it was an additional half mil for both the city and the township, what that would look like, and underneath it, if it was at a quarter mil in addition, what that would look like. And assuming that the millage wouldn't start being collected until 2020. I haven't had time to review if all these figures were absolutely just transferred over from the packet that we had previously for the joint meeting. And I'll look at that over the next couple of days, but it looks like one of the council members at least took the time to try to look at it and see what the shortfall would be in some different scenarios. So I think that's promising, at least from being able to have a conversation about it moving forward.
Yeah, Mr. Guzette.
I just had a question, just a clarification question. Did you say that this does not have 4 full-time plus the chief in there? It's back to 3, is that what you indicated?
Yeah, if you look at Treasurer Guzek on the top, it showed it with the numbers that we had projected for the wages. On the bottom half of the sheet, they ran it assuming that we would eliminate 1 full-time position.
Okay.
And then also, as you mentioned, the wages were incorrect as well.
But the wages were incorrect on what they eliminated out of there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Is there a way that you can reach out to the mayor and find out what their plans are for the next step?
Well, we certainly will be doing that. I mean, we need to move forward. I think we have a little more urgency to getting something. We're trying to get a millage nailed down before the end of the year so that we can get on the ballot first thing May, I believe. So,
I mean, I really think from our perspective, we're tasked with making sure that we can provide fire prevention and protection for township residents now and into the future. And this joint operation, I believe we agreed, was working well. The combination full and paid on call was working well. I really think that our conversation just needs to continue to be steered if we're going to continue in that model. And then what would we need to add from a funding perspective to get there? So I think we as a group know in the direction we're heading in, and hopefully we're together on this. We're both heading in the same direction accordingly. So it's a matter of we'll continue to pursue it. I think we have to be prepared for every option or every availability moving forward. But I think that the data clearly shows that we're in a deficit situation, and that's primarily brought on from our inability to fund capital needs at this time under the current funding scenario. So it's a matter of, I think our conversation is really about if we agree that we're underfunding, and I think with the projected growth of our population over the next decade, talking about taking less personnel to provide services to the community. I'll leave that up to Chief to provide direction on that, but to me, it inherently tells me that's probably the wrong way to go, to think that we can have some savings by cutting personnel. I think that the personnel level was set back in 2011, and we're already one short and not filling that position. With the idea that that's going to cover us through 2030 seems a little bit scary to me. I think we need to make sure that we're projecting for appropriate personnel. We didn't add any of these projections, and I think maybe the case could have been made that maybe we needed to add, not take away. But I think that really the matter before you is, we know we're in a deficit situation moving forward. How far will we let it get? I really think that we need to take action, have something on the ballot for 2018, and not wait until it totally expires.
Yeah. I think we do have a task force, so we will continue. Yes, Mr. Kent?
Mr. Supervisor, regarding Mr. Lehman's comments, I agree. However, we got to be cautious that we rush this through the city, that we don't rush this through the city, because keep in mind, this is going to be a tie-bar millage. If we do decide on a millage,
Not necessarily.
well, I would be totally against it if it is not, because already you hear from the residents in Grand Blanc Township, we're already paying a disproportionate amount of funding to the fire department today in terms of what I feel who benefits the most. Okay, so the 8317. If we pass a $500,000 in Grand Blanc Township and the city doesn't either have a ballot, a millage request, or it fails because if their city council doesn't support it, the community is not going to vote for it, right? So that means that Grand Blanc Township then would be paying well over 90%, maybe 92% is what I roughly did in my head here a few minutes ago, of the funding for the fire department. For a community that, for the most part, with our staffing where it's at presently, and that the city benefits the most in response times and you name it. So we either have to have them on board, and we have to have this has to be a joint effort, or I'm going to tell you, I won't be behind it.
Yes, Mr. Thomas?
Well, obviously, we do have to have some type of millage. I mean, we have to, because we are, the other millage is running out. We are well underfunded, but I don't want to leave this on the back burner. So I'm asking you, Mr. Superintendent, that could we leave this on the agenda on the first meeting of next month? And just leave it on a standing agenda item so we don't let this get...
You have I think Dennis and I are going to make sure that we don't let this fall anywhere.
Because if we have to, not have a tie bar, which I'm not totally convinced we have to have, it's that we're going to have to move quickly.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Lehman said it well in that, we have to provide fire service, and we're paying over $1 million of the budget, so it's a good chunk of the fire department's budget, whether it's 90% or 85 or whatever. So we have to move forward. So what we may be doing is asking a few of our board members to. We have a task force right now made up of Ms. Lane, Mr. Guzak, Mr. Lemata, Mr. Massey, and there may be, though, some things that we asked a couple of trustees to sit in on to go maybe just look at the equipment and capital needs and what have you. So we're going to break it down, and we'll be glad to share that information with the city, but we have to move forward, and I think we'll be prepared to report on that as we move along, whether it's next meeting or each of the next 9 meetings. Yes, Mr. Kemp.
Be careful. If you put a ballot, if you put this millage, now the renewal I'm not talking about here, we're talking about the additional half mil. You rush this thing to the voters, and they find out that the city's not going to have it on their ballot to throw in their half mil. I'm going to tell you, the township, we're going to be goats. The township residents are not going to pass this thing. Why put a millage before those and have it defeated?
Yeah.
Well, we're
Rather
stronger
than,
together.
it's,
I don't think we want to rush it, but we want to make sure we don't stall it.
We're going to have to cut bait if we don't finish.
all we'd be doing is a fruitless effort if we put this on a ballot just for the sake of putting it there. That's the message I'm trying to send here.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
It
Yes.
makes no sense.
I have a question.
Mr. Massey. Mr. Kemp.
Mr. Clark, do you feel as though 7 months is ample time to negotiate whatever we need for it to go on the ballot?
To have the city, yes, but I'm saying if they're not on board and we don't work with them to get that on board and then get their support behind it, it's just all this work and all this planning for nothing, because then we're going to have to go to step 2, which is longer shelf life on the capital, a rolling stock, equipment, staffing changes, whatever, to meet the budget. Obviously, we're going to meet the budget, but the point is, if you really want this, and we really feel we need this, then this has got to be a together effort, city and township, and it will not pass in the township alone if they know that the city residents aren't going to be paying for the service that they, for the most part, benefit the most from.
Okay, Ms. Lane?
After being there last night and being at the joint meeting, I feel confident that the city is interested in knowing and understands we're better together. They simply are taking their approach to looking at the same expenses and looking at the future. Their method is different, just like Ford has a model, Chevrolet has a model. They both will work, and I believe that we will be together when we make our final decision.
I hope you're right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Massey.
it appears to me that the township, not the township, I'm sorry. It appears to me that the city has not reviewed the information that is provided monthly. And we are rehashing that monthly information when we have our commission meeting.
Yes.
It appears to me that the city, I assume, Chief, that you have been forwarding that information to the city, right?
To the city, the council member and the city manager and the mayor.
Yes. They respond in such a manner that it makes me think that it's the first time they have heard some of the things that we are talking about.
Possibility, but it's been shared with them, so I'm not sure why the information's been disseminated out.
Thank you.
Mr. Lehman?
Trustee Massey brings up a good point. You have to understand, from Township's perspective, we've been talking about this for over a year. And it came about last year when the city first questioned the percentages of who was paying what, and it initiated a conversation that they thought maybe they were paying a little bit more than they should have been, which caused me to put the spreadsheet together that uncovered that legal fees weren't going through the fire commission, building repairs, some other things that started this. And it's been over a year. We gave them 3 meeting dates last year and asked them to meet to start this conversation, and they rejected them. They couldn't come up with alternative dates. They just were unable to meet with us. So I guess I was a little bit taken aback when the city council felt like we were bushwhacking them or surprising them with this information at the joint meeting. We've had the conversations for a year. We've had the conversations with the city manager and mayor. This has been an ongoing conversation for well over a year, since I got here 18 months ago, about funding. And this information, I would assume that they had also talked about it. When I send you out information to the board, I obviously don't include the city council members on it, nor should I. That's not my role. I would have assumed that that information was also going out to them. It clearly hasn't been, so maybe we are a little bit, we had a leg up on them, I guess. Now they have the information, and maybe we'll see as we move closer to June that they'll understand, they'll start to come to terms with what we have already come to terms with a year ago, that we're underfunding our fire services.
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
Since we're on this subject, and let's segue into this, at our joint meeting, Chief, we were talking about the energy cost for building 2.
Yes, the station.
This station, have we actually taken the funds and separated it so that the fire commission will start paying for the energy costs instead of the township paying for it all?
And this time, no, it's not taking place. It will be taking place in the very near future, I know that.
We haven't done it yet.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
There's another station too.
Okay, moving on to our next topic is zoning issues, and regard to ZC number 649, which is 5081 Genesee Road, APC tower that was tabled from April 13th and 25th, 2017 meetings. The board will consider the Planning Commission's recommendation to conditionally rezone a 3-acre portion of PID 12-02-100-11 from R3 to LDM to allow a wireless communication facility to be located in the northeast corner of the parcel with frontage on Maple Road. Anybody care to discuss? We do have a couple of correspondence, I think, that Mr. Massey distributed.
Yes.
Would you like to? Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt this
Item.
conditional rezoning.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. For support? Discussion? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, I am not in favor of this conditional rezoning. I believe that the technology is expanding daily, and this particular tower at its height will be antiquated within reasonable time. We're already looking at putting equipment on poles in the road right-of-way. I also think that it is negatively going to impact the future development of that area, because although this is only 3 acres, it was cut down at the last minute at the meeting, which I think was, in my personal opinion only. Had it been what the company wanted, they should have come through with their first full, honest effort with complete documentation, and not switch at the end of the stream just before they went over the waterfall. And I can only, because of my years of experience here, sorry to say, I believe that converting this 3 acres to low density will, in a year or 2 years, be the answer for the property owner who says, I can't develop this as single family because there's a cell tower here, and therefore it will not only affect our master plan, but any future developments. The residents think that they're protected now, but I have seen that happen too many times. And the other thing is, even if you vote to approve this tonight, they still have to go back to the Board of Appeals, because they haven't located that cell tower in an appropriate location on that site, where later this month, after the Planning Commission says okay, the ZBA said here's how you have to do it, and if this board says okay, they still have to go back to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then they have to say, we need a variance for 291 feet
because we're still too close to residential zoning, and they cannot, with that kind of request, again, in my personal opinion, meet the criteria that it wasn't self-instituted, because it absolutely is. They have a 50-acre site. If they came in with an original rezoning that met the reasonable requirements without variances, might consider it. But I think that this entire project, and I know we have some, I mean, our zoning ordinance needs to be updated, and I know we will take care of it through our attorney and our planners and the planning commission. So even though we are slightly flawed, I think this whole application is significantly flawed for those matters that I have indicated.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Massey.
based on the data that I collected, the residents are much pleased with rezoning the 3 acres. So I am here to vote for it because it's what the residents want. Now, I don't know where the clerk got her information from, but I went door to door, knocking on doors, talking to the residents. They definitely need the tower service because they do have sometimes they drop calls, and some of the homes in that area, especially with one family, a parent, they only have that one cell phone. And if they drop a call at 1 o'clock in the morning, they have no way to make an emergency call. So it's my thought that regardless what the clerk says, we need to pass this. We need to help our residents because the residents are the one that we are working for. We're not working for the clerk, we're working for the residents. And that's why I asked, when this came up at a meeting a few weeks ago, that's why I asked to table it so I could go to the residents and see what the residents want. Now, I have gone to the residents and brought back my findings to the board. And I'm recommending that we pass this.
I would like to commend you on making the effort to go out and meet with residents, and Mr. Massey, for the public, actually presented a list of about 10 residents and a letter from another resident that he met with. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that, Mr. Massey. Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Supervisor, I am against this, and I'll give you the reasons why. I understand that the residents, there is a need for that area for a cell tower, and according to the attorney, they said that they're going to put a cell tower up every 1.5 to 3 miles square. There's other locations around that area that could be be suited for that, for the tower. And it doesn't have to be in Grand Blanc Township. So it will be built, but I'm with the clerk on this. And the reason is because I'm not looking for the residents at this time. I'm looking for the families that'll be moving in at a later time. When the property owner actually comes and asks us to rezone it, and our master plan doesn't show that we're going to have apartment facilities there, and that's why I'm voting against it. Because the tower will be built in that general area somewhere, but it doesn't need to be built there.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Massey?
Trustee, I'm surprised that you're going against the will of the residents. They didn't vote you in to go against their will. They voted you in to support their efforts in making their community a worthwhile living community. So I still say that I think we should pass this.
Oh, I understand what you're saying, Trustee Massey, but what I'm saying is if you went to the residents and said, absolutely, there will be a cell tower built in this general facility, maybe not 200 feet tall or 199 foot tall, making it, how far was that roll? 40 feet higher than the tree line? And on top of that, in 10, pardon?
The tree line was 80 feet.
80 feet.
So you're going to 198, 195.
So 100 feet higher than the tree line. And I know that the residents haven't realized that when their home values change because we're going to be building apartments there, that's
Okay.
the issue that I'm saying, Trustee Massey.
All right, I'd like to let Mr. Mansour speak.
So, recalling the initial presentation a month or so ago, I mean, there were a couple of factors that kind of overrode a lot of our options here. The primary one being, I believe it was basically the coverage, necessity for the coverage. And Mr. Laddie, I think when we discussed that, the options that we had, in order to deny that or to change it would be to provide a competing assessment. Otherwise, we were pretty much in the place where, now that we have residents that are okay with it, we're pretty much in a position where the company has presented a need. They have taken their request from 50 acres down to a much more reasonable 3 to target it better. So I'm just wondering again whether we need to refresh ourselves on the options that we have here as a board.
I would like Mr. Laddie to do that, but let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll make my comments. Mr. Laddie?
Well, and you're exactly right, Mr. Mansour. The Planning Commission held a public hearing. The members of the public appeared, and they voiced their comments. And I think Mr. Massey's conclusion, they had great concern about the size, the 50-acre size. As you'll see with conditional rezonings, the applicants responded to that and shortened up the request to the 3 acres that are in the northeast corner of the property. And the residents were relieved by that. They also were relieved with the idea that the tower would be approximately 1,300 feet from the folks in Williamsburg Farms. It does still require a variance from the ZBA, and that's the side lot variance that would be to the eastern boundary, and that's the church. And the Zoning Board of Appeals will take that issue up on their own. But as far as the need for service, as far as the availability of co-location, as far as the analysis of the hierarchy of sites, your Planning Commission considered all of that, as they do and have done in the past. And they came to the conclusion that given all those criteria, that the request for special land use was advisable. Now, what's before you tonight isn't the special land use request, it's just the conditional rezoning. And so, and as Ms. Lane hinted to, we have an interesting anomaly in our ordinance that prohibits cell tower service if it's within 500 feet of a residential district. And as I pointed out to you last month, probably 80% of Grand Blanc Township is a residentially zoned, has residentially zoned districts. The way to solve that anomaly in the ordinance was for the applicants to either request a text change or to request a conditional rezoning, which they did. And just because of that idiosyncrasy, this question is before you, because you'll never see a cell tower. You haven't seen them before, and you won't see them again. It's only here because of that conditional rezoning. So the items that Mr. Thomas raised and the items that Mr. Mansour raised and Mr. Massey have all been analyzed in the forum that is proper for that analysis, and that is the Planning Commission. The issue relating to the side yard setback, that'll go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is a separate body for you. So that is how we found ourselves here today, and it is interesting. Again, as far as the height of the pole, the Planning Commission considered that, and according to the ordinance, if the applicants can make a showing that additional height is required, then the Planning Commission is allowed to grant that height, and for whatever reason, they found that to be applicable. So I think the categorization that your focus is pretty limited is pretty accurate. And however you may feel about propagation maps and search rings and co-locations, that is the purview of the Planning Commission.
Just a few comments that I would like to make. As a trustee or as a supervisor here, sitting up here, it's real easy for us to vote no on any type of thing that may be the slightest bit controversial that somebody may not like. Just vote no, the residents before you. But, because, I mean, who's going to argue with you that you should have let that cell tower be, you know, in our township? Probably nobody, right? But I can tell you this, in their conversations with our legal counsel, that we vote no on this, we're going to be spending a considerable amount of money in court. Is that a wise use of our taxpayer money? I don't think it is. So regardless of how you feel about whether or not Verizon studies are correct on whether or not they need a tower there, I find it hard to believe that they would locate a tower somewhere where they don't need it. As far as height, I would rather maximize each tower that we do place in our township so that we don't have a tower every mile. So put up a larger, higher tower, you can minimize the number of towers. You know, I think one of the things we do is we try as a board to find people that are willing to serve in our planning commission that have concern of the township in mind. They try to look at the aesthetics of our township and make sure that whatever developments come to our township fit in. And we give that responsibility and the authority to do that. And I think when we take the recommendation and throw it out the window and say, we don't think you know what you're doing here, we're going to override that, I'm not sure it's being very respectful of those individuals. So just a few of my comments. Ms. Lane?
I hope this board understands, because I know the planning commission members and they know that I respect them. But it is up to me to do my own personal due diligence and do what I believe is in the long-term best interest of the residents. I don't vote yes or no just to accommodate and think of a re-election. Never have, never will. My only goal has been to take all the information, respect the opinion of others, and come to my own knowledgeable decision on what my conscience requires me to do in the long term for the best interest of this township. I've always stood that ground, and I will stand it.
Okay. Any other comment? Mr. Bruzak?
I just have a question for Mr. Laddie. If it has to go to ZBA, what happens if they turn it down?
Well, that's an interesting question.
I mean, we voted for something, they turn it down. Shouldn't we wait until they vote before we?
No,
before we vote?
The only question that they'll be getting is should they grant the relief for the side yard setback? And off the top of my head, it may be, I think that tower is proposed to be located within 200 and maybe 240-ish feet off the side yard. If they decide to not grant that relief, then I think the applicants will have to consider potentially relocating that tower in a different location farther away from the setback.
Is that going to change the 3 acres?
It won't change the 3 acres.
So the 3 acres should accommodate any changes that ZBA?
That's my opinion. If the applicants want to add some thoughts. I know that, well, let me say this before I don't want to put them on the spot because they may have some comments to make to the ZBA, but they're trying to accommodate their ideal transmission location, and they called it a search ring, basically. And I think that we talked about the size of that search ring and whether or not it's a half mile around, and we talked about diameters. It may be that if they receive conditional rezoning and special land use for that 3 acre site, they may be able to reposition that tower within that 3 acres and not need a variance. I understand they want a variance, and they may be able to say, from a technological standpoint, they might go in, let's switch gears to the ZBA. They may go in front of the ZBA and say, we have a practical difficulty. We've received rezoning for a 3 acre piece. Our experts have shown that our search ring is located, we put that tower right in the center of that search ring. And for us to move that tower out of the search ring to accommodate the additional 200 feet of side yard setback, which by the way is next, it may be zoned residential, but it's next to a church, which is next to a soccer field.
it causes us a hardship to do that because of the because of the ability for reception and transmission. That's just a hypothetical argument they could make. But if the ZBA wasn't persuaded by that argument, or if they have a better argument and say, no, we're not going to grant you that relief, and they can't relocate within that 3-acre piece, then they've got a serious problem. They have a serious problem if that happens. Because we've already made our analysis on the 3-acre site, we rezoned it, and we found the 3-acre site appropriate for the tower. We're not going back. We've already offered our opinions, and they're gonna accelerate or slow down at the hands of the ZBA.
Right, so if the ZBA says no, they're not gonna do it, then
They've got to put the tower somewhere else in that 3 acres.
in the 3 acres, right? So they can't sue us, right?
Well, I don't think I don't think if the ZBA said you can't put that tower in that location, you have to move it over. I don't think they'd be able to sue us saying, well, we had to go 200 feet out of our optimum search ring. We may have diminished their property right. We haven't taken a property right by regulation from them. So I think if they did sue us on that topic, I don't think they'd be successful. But that's on that topic alone. That's not on the conditional rezoning.
Yeah. I've got a question for you, Mr. Laddie. It was mentioned that by us approving this, that it could cause the rest of that parcel to be rezoned to, do you see anything influencing that, or?
Well, I don't see any, somebody can ask for anything. So
Right.
There's a quote that for $150 now, $175, anybody can file a suit over anything. Just because, and by the way, this is the property owner that's coming to us asking for this very specific conditional rezoning for this 50-acre site. They're entering into a lease for whatever square footage of ground lease that they have negotiated for. And that doesn't necessarily mean the fact that 3 acres is rezoned to the least dense appropriate location because of an anomaly in our ordinance does not mean that the rest of the acres is going to fall. If you came in with a traditional analysis on the rezoning, you'd flip over to the master plan and you tick down those 12 criteria that we review, and hindering your own site for profit is not one of those criteria. And so the fact that that property was rezoned for a specific purpose and a specific condition that's identified by contract, that is not going to cause us to have to do anything.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Massey?
I would like for the minutes to reflect the clerk's comments about she came to her own opinion about what the residents need.
Okay. It's been noted. Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Okay. So I think we had a motion and a second.
Yes,
Ms.
sir.
Clerk? Okay. Are you asking for roll call?
I'm not asking you yet.
Please do a roll call.
Okay. Let's call for the vote.
Mr. Kent,
No.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes?
Mr. Thomas,
No.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
myself, no, Mr. Bennett.
Yes. What was the vote?
4-3, passed.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is operational issues. The board will consider a request from DPW Director Sears for a one-time waiver for drinking water capital fees to supplement the CDBG grant award for water connections to homes in the residential streets in the northwest section of the township on the east side of Fenton Road, south of Maple Road.
Mr. Sears was unable to be here this evening, although he was here Tuesday to discuss it. He did provide what was sent out to the board. You do have a copy in front of you of the water tap estimates for different scenarios, depending on what the board would wish to do. Unfortunately, he had a personal issue that he needed to attend to this evening and was unable to be here, but I'd be happy to answer any questions I can.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes, Mr. Kent?
I'd like to,
Mr. Thomas.
I'd like to make the motion that we adopt the request from the DPW director for the one-time waiver of the drinking water capital fee.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion support.
Which
Ms. Mike?
option, for clarification of the motion, which of the options that he presented are you in favor of, Mr. Thomas?
Of the northwest section of the township on the east side of Fenton Road, south of Maple Road. Right?
Based on this,
Well, the latest,
Excuse me, Ms.
Yes,
Lane.
Mr.
So what this was meant to do is, this is new information.
Right.
But scenario one in front of us is the one that waives the township capital, excuse me, the tap fee.
that was originally
It
proposed.
was originally proposed. Exactly right.
And the other 3 scenarios have been added this evening as options.
So which one is the one that he's wanting and the
Well,
number?
Scenario one
Scenario one.
Number one?
was the one that was in the packet. But the other 3 were the ones that, actually, I asked if there was some other middle ground, because on Tuesday when we discussed it, it sounded like there were a few that were looking for other options. And so I think Mr. Sears put these together
right.
for that.
I just wanted it to be clear for the minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, I just have a question on this. I know that it was said before that there's no conflict of interest if this is done. However, there's 118 homes in here, and it's all CBG grants, okay? And every year we get CBG grants, okay? So then next year when we get some, potentially we could give more up, okay? So potentially what you're looking at is 118 homes times $2,600 is $309,000 for the life of the amount. And I realize it's helping the residents, but you're opening the door up so that if I move into that neighborhood, I'm gonna say I want that. And there could be, granted, there's no other CBG granted areas, I guess. This is the only one I think in the township. But you're giving up $309,000 that should go to put the infrastructure in, because we're greatly expanding, and that is built our model. That's built into our model. So if you do that, you're going to have to increase the fees for everybody else, because you still need a certain amount of money to expand the township and build the system. And the model's told us this 2,600 will do it at this point in time. I know it does change over a period of time. But to me, you're opening up a big precedent of giving it away, because I know in the past the townships have given things away, and then of course then they have to stop it because they ran out of money, and we saw that happen in 2008 where a lot of things were stopped. So I think it should be funded not with that way, so I won't be voting it with.
Mr. Mansur?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat a couple of things that Treasurer Guzak said, because I've done kind of similar analysis and come up with the same thing. One of the things that I didn't see when Director Sears made this request was anything from any of the neighborhood people that were requesting relief of these fees to hook into municipal water. And it doesn't really surprise me, because as I've looked at some of the tax records there, some of these houses are owned by trusts. So a blanket coverage of this whole area, to waive these fees would not necessarily, pull people in who, couldn't otherwise afford it. People could take advantage of that who could afford it. So that was the first thing. The second is when you take this into municipal water, then you pretty much rope the homeowners into about $100 a month kind of water fees. Those people that are on their wells now, they make the investment. The investment lasts for some time. There's maintenance, but it's not the same as writing a check every month or every 3 months as we have it set up now. Next point was going back to Treasurer Guzak's. Yes, this is unprecedented move. I mean, we do not really want to set this as a precedent, especially because these homes, have water now. It's not like this is solving some, problem where people don't have access to something. I mean, they actually have water today. And then, you know, again, making this move, you know, is going to deviate from the funding model that both of our consultants on Tuesday, both Rowe and Potter, say keep our infrastructure in good shape and well funded. So the precedent that could end up costing the township, according to Treasurer Guzak, over $300,000 toward that fund without solving any problem identified for our residents. I guess I just don't see how that's a good measure to adopt, a good use of our resources for this board. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Kent?
I echo a lot of Mr. Mansour and Mr. Guzak's comments, except I think we were, the council answered our question about precedent Tuesday night, so I'm okay with the precedent and not concerned about that. However, I do agree with most of what Mr. Mansour and Mr. Guzak said. When I look at the proposals, it stands out at me that the county, who wants us to always go into joint 50-50s with our funds for ditching and, you know, the other things that we use community block grant for, paving, 50-50 funds. Yet, I'm not even going to say that they haven't even been, that they've turned us down, but I would like to see this. I'm going to vote no tonight. And then if we're going to bring this issue back up again, I'd like to see the county go into a joint venture with us for the good of the people. If they really believe that, and you heard Mr. Sears the other night that we're in the business to sell water, I mean, that's where the revenue comes in, right? Well, the county buys, we pay the county for the water, and then we turn around and give it and sell it to the residents and make a profit, right? So my issue is that the county should be waiving their capital fee or be at least asked to. That would have got about 4 more or 6 more homes. Okay, and then in the end of the day, my whole concern about this thing, and Mr. Mansour touched on it, was, you know, they haven't asked, number one. Number two, it's 119 homes, and we're going with scenario 1, which is 11 homes. Is that what I did in the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
11 homes out of 119. I just think it's like cutting off your leg and putting a Band-Aid on it. I mean, it's just, you know, and expect that you're going to live. I don't see the benefit coming out of this.
Mr. Massey?
Trustee Clark, are you suggesting that we table the issue until we get more information?
Well, I would certainly, if the county would, I would reconsider my thought if the county would consider waiving, because if we're going to waive with capital fees, it ought to be all. But at the same time, I share Mr. Mansour and Mr. Guzak's comment about the model and everything we did, and there was a lot of work that went into that. About, in fact, I think it's been 2 boards ago with that water model, and it included the capital fees. So I guess I can't say that I absolutely would, but I'm just letting you know tonight that the county, I don't see them ever being into any of these ventures with us, but yet they always want us to contribute to their 50-50 programs or their share programs.
Well, let Mr. Lehman know.
Just for a point of clarification, we have had several inquiries from the residents in this neighborhood. And again, you have to understand that the CDBG funds were made available specifically because of the income of this neighborhood. Yes. That's why we got the block grant. And there have been several residents in that area. It is known for poor water quality in some of the areas. We've had several inquiries to be hooked up, but when they hear the price tag of being hooked up, they can't afford it. They back off. So what Director Sears, we can take the CDBG funds and just, you know, do the whole thing. The difference is that we're going to do 6 houses instead of 11. He was trying to just extend the money. The other alternative is that what we'll do is then it gets paid, the township gets paid with the grant, the county gets paid with the grant, we pay for the installation, and the homeowner will pay for the meter and MXU. So they'll have $400 to get hooked up. We can still do 6 homes so that we can still spend the money. You know, if there's any other alternative, what Director Sears said is that any of the other alternatives, if it gets even to the alternative number 2, where it's a $1,400 investment, he doesn't believe we'll have any takers on the offer. He doesn't believe that we have residents who can afford it. So his concern is that we end up not spending the money that we were awarded, you know, which could happen. Although I think what we would more likely do then is make it available at the original idea that we can use the grant, we'll hook up as many homes as possible based upon the estimate. That means 6 homes as long as those homeowners on a first come, first served basis apply, and we can hook up 6 out of the 119 homes. The initial water lines in that area were put in with a same community development block grant.
So with the paving and everything. and all
$250,000, yes.
Ms. Lane and then Mr. Massey.
Community development block grants, I'm being repetitive, are only for low-income areas. In both areas, presidential and immediately north of here, we put in the water lines. And I have no problem when they're limited to that income. You spend it when you can. There's no way, in my opinion, we can get 50-50 on CBG money with the county. But I think we need to spend it rather than give it off to some other community to use for their residents.
Yeah.
If I could respond to that. I'm not asking for the county to do 50-50 with us on that. I'm saying for the county to waive their capital fee if we're going to waive ours. Okay, that's $3,500, and we can actually do more homes with it. But in the end of the day, okay, so if we have if we have this water quality issue in that area, and we have 50 homes that want it, and I understand Mr. Sears is going to be first come, first serve, right? Well, what do you got an elderly person that takes them longer to walk to the mailbox, and maybe they don't get it mailed until the next day, and they don't get it because I see this thing just being a mess. Because we're going to do 11 homes out of 119 are going to be offered this really cheap way of getting the water hooked to their home. I think we're going to create a real issue for ourselves.
Mr. Massey?
If I understood you, Superintendent, correctly, may I ask you, you're saying if we don't spend the money, we lose the money?
Well, yeah, I mean, we would lose the money if we don't find one way to do it, but when it was applied for in the award, we've got $40,165 that we have been given to connect homes. If you look at scenario number 3 on your sheet, we can connect those homes. We can connect 6 homes using everything with grant money that will allow us to connect those 6 homes. So we'll spend the money. We'll do it with fewer homes. It will still be on a first come, first served basis, and it will just be 6 homes so that we can spend the money.
Just, if I might make a few points, we discussed, I think on Tuesday and maybe even maybe here at the township offices, but you know, it's been proposed, we can't go down the road of qualifying individuals or what have you, because it opens up a slippery slope to doing that across the board. So you know, we were awarded $40,000. I want to make sure we spend that money somehow. It sounds like the question is how we do that and what portion of it do we want to, if we want to make a contribution towards that, or how we do it. So I think first come, first, I guess one of the things that first off, the first come, first serve, is that something that we can live with, that we're going to have to do it first come, first serve? Is that, am I hearing that from everybody?
Yes.
We agree that it's going to have to be first come, first serve, because we can't go into coming up with qualifying things. It's got to be in this area due to, you know, the grant. There are probably some health concerns that isn't part of this equation right now. So what it comes down to, I think, is figuring out whether or not we want to contribute financially, or it isn't going to be an outlay of cash, but it's going to be an in-kind type of thing where we're actually covering the costs. We're not paying the fees in. So I think obviously that's where the issue is. Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Superintendent, what is your recommendation?
To me, it's that we move forward and spend the money, and it's, you know, I just don't want to give money back anytime we've got an opportunity to help somebody in the community.
I don't
want to give any money.
Which option is your?
The capital fee waiver is a big ask. I understand that. With the goal that we can hook up more homes, and I think what Director Sears wanted was to say, man, if we could hook up 11 homes this time, we're getting roughly 10%. When we get new CDBG funds in, you know, for the next round. This one covers us from 17 through 19, so we won't get another one until 2020, and maybe we'll get awarded 60,000. We asked for 180,000 for this program. We got 40. We'll ask for additional funding, and we'll get what we get, and then we can do another first come, first served, and we can hook up another 6 homes or 11 homes or 16 homes, however we do it. But it is somewhat precedent setting. In fact, if we are going to continue to use block grant monies to do this, then we need to be consistent. So if the board decides not to do the waiver, that's fine, let's just do the 6 homes, and then 3 years from now when we get an additional block grant, we'll continue to follow that same precedent. What we don't want to do is be inconsistent and waive it this time, not waive it next time. We just need to set a standard for how we're going to move forward.
And what is your recommendation out of the scenarios?
If I had a vote, I would probably vote to waive the capital fees. I would and try to connect more homes. I would go with number 1, knowing that these homes are going to get hooked up, and when they do, they start paying into the capital fees through the ready to serve fee that every single one who's hooked up to water pays. So they do eventually start buying into the program and adding to the capital. When you set up, like our financial model's been working, and part of that is capital fees, and it's a good balance. This is very specific. This is block grant money and extending it, and that would be my logic behind it.
Yeah. Mr. Kent?
Okay, I'm going to say this then. Mr. Massey asked me how I want to vote on this. The motion right now is to do option 1, right, which is 11 homes. Okay, I'm going to vote against that. But what I would be in favor of, based on Mr. Lehman's comments, is that I would be in favor of the option where we just spend the money without waiving capital fees, which is the 6 homes, and then we just continually apply for this grant down the road. Here, think about it this way. If we're going to waive $27,500 in fees on those 11 homes for the township, well, we're going to take that federal money intended for low-income people, and we're going to pay $11,000 of that to the county for their capital fee. We're going to take $11,000 of that $40,000 and give it to the county, who's in the business of selling water and going to profit on that water. This is what I was, trying to get at. So I'm going to vote against the motion made, and I would vote for the motion to spend the $40,000 entirely on the 6 homes without waiving any fees.
Scenario number 3?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
So, if I'm not mistaken, about 45 minutes ago, our fire chief got up here and we were engaged in a long conversation about what the impact of not funding our capital costs are and how that leads us into a place where we don't want to be. I cannot believe that in the span of that time, that somehow we've kind of forgotten that money is used to keep our infrastructure. And I guess, if we're voting for this, it seems like we're voting to get into that kind of trouble down the road. Thank you.
Well, we certainly want to take a long look at, whatever decision we're making, and that, and I think, part of that long decision is looking at the health of our overall township, and I'm not talking about the quality of the water, I'm talking about the overall nature of our community. And I guess, one of the things I think we need to look at, whether it's, this issue or any others, is making sure that, well, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we're going to do in that neighborhood, I believe we received some block grant money to do ditching in that area. I know probably all of you have been to that and are familiar with that neighborhood, but they have for starters, they've got a tremendous flooding issue in that area. So I think there's some capital improvements that we need to look at with that community, because it's just like street paving, in that, we've had some neighborhoods come to us that turn down paving their streets because it's too expensive. Well, it gets to the point where that street is so horrible that, we may have to say, we're going to have you pave that street because it brings down the rest of Grand Blanc Township. And I'm not saying this neighborhood is in that shape, but if their water quality gets poor enough, if the infrastructure is poor enough, guess what? We need to invest in that area. I'm thinking that this isn't, being that it's been deemed as an economically depressed area by the county, or at least disadvantaged to the point where they qualify for these funds, we need to look at how we do support it. Because I want people, when they cross that line in the Grand Blanc Township, to notice that, hey, we're in some place that really takes care of the community. I'm not sure if this is the program that does that, but certainly if we're investing in infrastructure, that helps to bring property values up and make it a more desirable area. Yes, Mr. Kent.
President, I'd like to make a motion to amend the original motion to go with option 3, and when I call option 3, I'm saying no waiver of funds, and it appears that 6 homes would be able to be hooked up on a first come, first served basis with the grant.
Okay, does the maker of the motion?
Absolutely not. No, I'd like to amend my motion that we accept the motion that we adopt scenario number 3.
So you do accept the
Yes.
amendment? Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm getting the humor, okay?
And
And
Mr.
who
Massey, Mr. Massey was the second.
Yeah, Mr.
You
Massey?
concur with that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it's been
Okay.
amended.
All right.
I'll set, are you,
Okay.
Mr. Thomas,
Sorry, yeah.
besides concurring, you're going to be a second to Mr. Kent's motion?
No.
No, it's a new
No,
motion.
I changed my motion to
Ah.
show
Mr.
that
Massey supported it.
third.
So there's,
So we have
So
one
call for
motion.
the question.
That's fine.
does that need to be a resolution, or is that just regular voice
No, I think
vote?
it's just regular vote.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. With that,
Why didn't you say that at the beginning?
moving on to our next issue. Get the right agenda here. The board will consider a motion to accept the recommendation of DPW Sears to award the Holly Road Water Tower painting contract to Southern Brothers Painting for $431,000 to be paid from the water fund account number 592-536-970.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, there's a motion.
Mr. Massey.
Mr. Massey supported. Okay, any question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the board will consider a motion to approve the request of DPW Director Sears to order 120 East Jordan 6BR fire hydrant conversion kits from Ferguson Waterworks for an amount not to exceed $32,042.40 from account 592-536-970, and authorize the Township Superintendent to execute all related purchase orders.
So moved. Support.
Okay, there's a motion and support. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item D, the board will consider a motion authorizing the clerk to advise the Genesee County Metropolitan Planning Commission the Grand Blanc Township Board wants to extend their Community Development Block Grant Cooperative Agreement with Genesee County for fiscal years 2018 through 2020 as requested in their letter of April 24th, 2017. Does that need to be a roll call vote? Resolution, okay. All those in favor?
Have to have a motion first, gentlemen.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Clerk, I saw him out the corner of my eye.
Oh,
Mr. Mansour supported.
Discussion for a second.
Discussion?
Yeah, just a question. As we are applying to continue this agreement, we will have an opportunity, or at some point in the next, few months, there's going to be some
towards the end of the year.
proposals brought forth on what we would add, specific projects we recommend for this cooperation.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Keep in mind that they will not provide any more money for the Perry House, so don't have that on your list.
Okay.
In fact, this area, I believe, is the only area that could be considered, right, along with maybe north of the Township Hall.
We actually do get CDBG funds for like the senior center.
Okay.
This latest round of awards, we're going to do some sidewalk repair. We also put some of that money towards the director's salary at the senior center. So there's a variety of projects that can get funded.
Ms. Lane?
There's blight in different areas of the township that can be taken down. Any properties that belong to the land bank that are a problem can be resolved. So we can go back and put money into special assessments for roads, because at the time we did it years ago, we had 6 families that qualified, went to Genesee County, and had their road assessment paid off. So there are multiple wonderful projects to do with those monies.
Okay. With that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item D, the board will consider, let's see, I guess we just covered that one. Item E, the board will consider a motion to approve the annual renewal of the financial software service support fee for BS&A software for the period of May 1st, 2017 through May 1st, 2018, in an amount not to exceed $32,663.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Okay, there's motion support. Any
Discussion?
Discussion?
Yeah, just a note here, we're sitting here at May 11th, asking to approve a contract that started 10 days ago. Probably these contracts, I mean, we now know the next one's going to expire May 1st of 2018. But I'd like to make sure that we have, you know, that issue brought to this board a month before the contract expires.
Well, I know this, that in the past, I think as Mr. Lemata mentioned, these bills were scattered throughout the year for the different portions of the software, and we asked them to consolidate them and prorate that cost.
Now we have to
So
verify that.
well, we can probably go to them and request they send us their bill early, but
This was invoiced on May 1st this year, and so we received it in the mail after May 1st, so this is the first meeting we've had since we received the invoice. I mean, I can contact BSNA and ask if they'll invoice early, but this is based on when they send us the invoice.
and oftentimes I tell them even insurance policies work that way, that you get invoiced and they keep it in effect. Yes, Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, expounding on what Trustee Al said, if invoice should be included the date we receive the invoice, that's probably what you really asking for, right? Because that's the only reason we know what the cost is by the invoice, receiving the invoice, right?
Right.
Supervisor Bennett, I mean, when I get my insurance bills, I usually get them, you know, 3 or 4 weeks before they're due. And so I'm just asking for that courtesy for this board.
Sure, I understand.
Yes.
With commercial policy sometimes. Anyways.
That's your bag.
Yeah. So anyways, we'll work on that. They probably don't get too many requests to get their people to get their bill early, but we'll ask them. But that's fine for budgeting purposes as well. Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we added this item to the agenda for this evening. The board will consider a motion to approve including $37,500 for the sump pump collector system. Design and inspection costs inadvertently left out of the original agreement to the Concord Green Special Assessment District, and authorize the township supervisor to execute the agreement.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
Okay, there's motion support. Mr. Guzak?
I just have a couple questions. So the total amount that we're adding to the bond is $37,500, is that correct?
Yes.
Do all the members of that subdivision know that they're increasing it by $37,500?
No, they inadvertently left it.
I know, but I mean, so right now, the residents, how many residents are?
Mr. Lima, would you like to comment on
How many
that?
residents are in that particular area?
One of the things, it's a good point Treasurer Guzak brings up. One of the things that's important to understand is that when they get costs, their estimated costs, they don't have the exact dollar amount when these go out. And so one of the things that happens is that as long as it's within 10% of the cost, we still move forward with the special assessment district. If it exceeds 10% of the overall cost, then we have to hold a public hearing, give them an opportunity to change their minds. This does not push us above the 10% threshold, but of course this project we haven't gotten the bids back in, or the county hasn't gotten the bids back in on doing this.
Right.
If those bids combined with this 37.5 that the road commission had left out in the original agreement exceeds that 10%, then it will go back to the homeowners and they'll have to make that decision. If they were to turn it down, unfortunately for us, when these things happen, then we as a township get stuck with the engineering costs that we have to pay the road commission for. And that's the risk of doing these things, is that if they were to stop it because it exceeded that 10% threshold, and that's why that 10% is built in there. But this will be included in that figure.
So how many residents is there? Is it like 100 or 50?
No.
No, it's only the back 2 roads, and as far as the
Well,
petition, I can tell you that we had a 60% approval rate on the petitions for this
Right,
project.
so how many people is it?
We can look it up. Mr.
Okay, but
Ladd?
it's 50 or 60. I'm just trying to figure out how much it's going to push up their payment, and of course we're
Well, we
going
don't know
10.
yet, because we don't know what the final cost
Well,
is.
I know, but based on, is it 10 years they're going for this? Is this going to be a 10-year thing?
Yes, it's a total redo of the roads.
Okay.
Mr. Ladd?
We are going, it is true that if we hit the threshold of 10% above our last estimate, and I think our last estimate was in the 400,000 range, excluding administrative costs and interest, if we pop above that 10%, then we are required to hold an additional public hearing where we invite, just like the last hearing we held, or the second hearing we hold on special assessments, where we invite the residents to come in, we tell them there's been an amendment, we recalculate the per lot fee, and then we listen to them, ask questions and make arguments about it. The only way this project, though, turns back is if you turn it back. Whether we hit that threshold of 10% or not, and I don't know what the bids will hold, we still are obviously going to inform the residents of this increased cost. They should get a letter explaining it. I think that maybe the letter should go out after we get some more insight into the bids, but that is the formal trip will be the 10%, but the informal obligation, in our opinion, is that we let them know as soon as it looks like we're going to have any increase in cost, and let them know that it's going to happen.
Did we have a ballpark figure of per resident cost?
Yeah, but it was, didn't you say it was 400,000?
400-ish, and if there are 100,000 or 100 homes,
So the 37 is almost 9%.
it's 8%, I think.
Yeah. Oh, mine's
So we're very close, and unfortunately, I think the way the winds are blowing contractor-wise, we might be needing that hearing anyway. But again, either way, we're going to let them know.
And then what was the engineering cost that in the budget so far from the county? Because usually they tell you how much they.
Yeah, I looked at the resolution this morning. I don't remember.
Because that's the amount we're going to have to eat, basically.
Well, we're not. That's the important thing to think about is we're at a second cost hearing. I call it needs hearing is the first hearing we have. The cost hearing is the second. At a second cost hearing, when we've already invested money, there have already been bids let. It would be very unusual for you to decide to turn this project around. And only you can decide to turn it around. If residents come here, if 100% of them come here and say, this is the last straw, I can't do this, but it would be only you that turns that project around.
But
Technically, you can't, I'm sorry.
it looks
Mr.
like.
Thomas?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm kind of lost. I'm sorry. You just said that if the residents vote against it, then it stops.
No.
If we hit the 10%
No.
threshold, then we're on the hook.
No, they're going to come in, and they may come in and tell you that they're now not in favor of the project.
Right.
And if you listen to them and you feel sympathetic to them and you say, we're going to pull the plug on the project, then we've got engineering fees and administrative costs that the county will look to recover from us. That's just the example of if they come in here and they tell you we don't want to go forward and you say, oh, I agree with you, we're going to pull the plug on it, then the county's going to look to you for reimbursement for those fees. There is a way for you to recover that from the petition circulators, but we've never done that historically. And so that's the process Mr. Lehman was describing to you.
So the 10% number, that is just for us to notify them that it's,
For the
I'm
new
sorry.
hearing.
You got it.
The new hearing.
Yeah, I missed.
You got it. And that's the formal, that's the 2 publications in the paper, and then we set the public hearing. If it comes up to 8% though, then we're still gonna send out a letter to everybody saying, hey, we're sorry about this, but here's what it came in at. We won't have a public hearing, but we're moving forward.
I just want to clarify some misinformation. I don't know where it came from, but I had a resident call me and say that they heard that the cul-de-sacs were going to not have to go along with it because they were in good shape. And I told them that we've never done that. That when we repave a neighborhood, the entire street system is paved regardless of the quality of cul-de-sacs or what have you. Is that correct, Mr. Laddie?
Yeah, I think you're talking about, we're talking about Concord Green right now,
I'm
but
talking
yes,
about
you're right.
North Green. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm confused.
Right. This is
That's
only 2
it.
streets,
Yes,
right?
this is
Correct, Fairview and
Okay.
Norfolk.
Okay.
my mistake.
The reason we don't do it is because of Concord Green. Some people didn't have to do their streets.
Well, right.
But that is the case, I mean, it isn't the case here because we don't have that involved, but for anybody's information, if there is a cul-de-sac involved in a repaving project.
You are correct. You're correct.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Supervisor, someone
Yes.
made a motion on this, it's been.
Yes.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the board will be presented an annual investment report for the township for 2016 from Treasurer Guzak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
I think you handed this out Tuesday evening.
Right, it was handed out Tuesday, and there's copies on the table over there. I'll just hit some of the highlights, because it is kind of lengthy. On the basic part of the economy, on the domestic front, the economy continues to show resilience, and recently a slight uptick, even 7 years into the recovery. There are several positive trends. The employment situation continues to be steadily improved. The housing market remains upward strategy, and the consumer confidence hovers at a very high level. Energy prices exhibit very few signs of resurgence, and stock prices are hitting high levels. Under the gross domestic product, the Bureau of Economic Analysis released the third estimate of the third quarter of 2016. GDP, seasonally, it's rated at 3.5. This figure is up 1.4 annualized growth for the prior quarter, and is an improvement over the previous estimate of 3.2. So the third quarter results proved to be robust for the fall of 2015. Under the housing, it does list that the housing segments continue to recover steadily. Existing homes for November, which is the last available date at the time, advanced to an annual rate of 5.6 million units, which is up 0.7% from the 5.5 million in October. But this is 15 points over November of 15, so it's greatly increased. The home builders have, and analysts have indicated that robust housing growth throughout the end of this year. However, they warn a pullback could occur after such a strong growth in recent months. Under the employment section, employment situation picked up the most relevant monthly report. Employers added 178,000 jobs in November, in line, which is consistent with the expectation of 175 new jobs, and a material improvement gain over prior months. The 3-month moving average has dipped somewhat, but still respectable at 176. Under the Fed policy, the Feds have raised the rate by 25 basis points, so went from 0.5 to 0.75, and they expect to have at least 3 more rate increases in 17. Under the overall outlook, the U.S. economy outlook has changed with the election of Mr. Trump. Initially, the evidence by reaction of both the equity and fixed income markets, the perception of pro-growth policies have encouraged investors who have driven stock prices up in almost 8% since the election. At the bottom of section 3, it shows the fourth quarter investments, which will indicate the date of the investments, the institution, the type, and normally the type is only money markets or CDs, the dollar amount, the rate, and the duration of it. And of course, the next page is the general, which shows some more items on general fund, and then it also shows the DPW fund. And on the next page, you got DPW plus 3 other ones that came up for maturity. So the overall growth for the fourth quarter, the 90-day T-bill averaged about 0.5, the commercial paper 0.52. We averaged about 0.45, and the overnight rate was 0.10. If you go to the 6th page, this shows the 5 banks that we're currently with, and this is banks that are rated by the latest quarterly system, which is now Knowles bond rating. And for that quarter, State Bank was a B, JP Morgan was a B minus, Private Bank was a B, TCF Bank was B, and Flagstar was a B. And of course, the next rating that we had published, they all stayed the same. These banks here have changed over a lot of periods of time, and we have to change them because the ratings go down, and so we have to get out of it. We will not go into any banks that are less than C. And at one point, we would not have any ones that were less than B. But now we got, because of the economy and all the stretch, we kept it at C, but luckily we try to maintain the Bs. We also have some pooled investments, and they're with Michigan Class, and that just started, but their S&P rating is AAA, so they're very, very strong. On page 7, you'll see the breakdown of our investments for the fourth quarter, where Flagstar has 27%, Private Bank 24%, Michigan Class has 8%, State Bank has 30%, Chase has 1%, and TCF has 1%. Then you show the overall fund growth that we had for that particular quarter. It shows the 4 quarters there. The last quarter was like 15,855. And then we recapped at the bottom the 4 quarters, and you can see that at one point in time, the first quarter we had Co-America, they were B, we had 25%. And then the next quarter for Co-America, it dropped down to 18%, and of course, then in the third and fourth quarter, we no longer have Co-America. We had to shift to another bank. Chase Bank, they've been consistently at 1%. They're our main bank. However, their funds, investment funds with them are very limited because they do not pay any interest, and so we only use them for our operating accounts, but we do have a small margin there. Private bank, we had 26%, then 27.30, now we're back to 24. That's been changing. The ratings have stayed the same, but their rates have dropped, so that's why it's starting to come down. And we actually have dropped even more out of private bank, so next year we're going to see even less with them because their rates aren't compatible. TCF Bank was a B minus. It stayed from B and then went up to a B. Went from 22% to 26 to 17 down to 10. And here again, it's because of the ratings. It's their rates. Their ratings are very high, but they're not competitive. Flagstar stayed B all the way across, but they've got 27%, and now we're still at 27%. But that is dropping a little bit. And then State Bank, you can see that we didn't have anything with State Bank in the first 2 quarters because the rates weren't high enough. And finally, in the 3rd quarter, we got 18%, and now we're getting up to around 30%. The pooled investments through the Michigan class, we were with them years and years ago, but I haven't been in there for probably 7 years because we had to get out of it way back. They had good earnings and things, but then their ratings dropped, so the ratings are always super high, but the return on investment was so low that we didn't get back until the 3rd quarter, and we got 4%, and then it shows 8%. And of course, in this quarter, we're actually doing more because they're exceeding everyone on the rates. And that's just a recap on
Mr. Mansour?
Mr. Guzak, 2 questions here. First, are you proposing to change any approach that you're using in terms of managing these investments in these banks? Are you, in terms of the ratings you'll use or whatever?
No. We use the lay system or the Knoll system. We use them. That's a rating that we have to pay for fee for. However, when I first got here, they used to come in a booklet, and the fee was less. And then there are free rating services on the web, and I compared all 3. And it was curious because on the one, Kroll showed, and they've got all the detail on everything on it, and they said this bank was such and such, and I went to another rating, and they said they were fine, and I thought, well, how can that be? You know, and the other one wasn't, so I relied purely on them because they do the research, and you got to remember that we don't have guarantee on these funds because it's only up to $250 per account, so we have to go with a bond rating, a rating that is superior. And so I will use those, and that's what I'm comfortable with. And so we'll continue with that. And the banks, they do change because, first of all, it's because of the ratings. I've had some banks that the rates were there, but the ratings went away, so I had to pull it all out. Okay? So it has changed my method of how far out will you take a CD. And normally I won't take it more than 12 months because I've had banks go down from A's to E's. Okay? And of course, we're only going to stay with C's. And so it's, I don't propose any changes, but we are constantly changing the mix. And then once you're in a variable state, now we're getting in more CDs because at one point the CD rates went away and the commercial paper wasn't that well. And of course, the only reason we get in the commercial paper is that pooled investment. That is high-grade commercial paper, but that's being managed by a professional corporation that has very good standings, and we always stayed with them, but when the rates went away, I couldn't invest with them when they were so low.
So the other question is there a cap in terms of how much of a percentage of a fund that you'll have with any particular bank or institution?
No, I try to spread it as far as I can, and usually we go 5 to 6 banks. Right now we got 5 banks, but the 6th one is pooled investments, so we try
maximum of like 30% in any particular bank?
The maximum, well, we don't have, we've got one bank, State Bank's at 30% in the 4th quarter. However, that's not the case now because you're right, I try to keep it closer to 25. But when we transfer funds, because I had to change a couple banks, and so I took it out of one bank, all the items, and then transferred into State Bank. And when you do that, you have to realize that we have a calendar build out there on a spreadsheet that every payables, we have 2 payables a month. Every payable, we're tracking previous amounts from previous years, and we're constantly adjusting it, that on this particular date, we expect to pay $560,000 out of the DPW fund, or $300,000 over there. And on payroll, you need at least $200 for one, $50 for one. But we try to make sure, especially when you go from a variable market to a fixed market like CDs, you have to be very careful, because if your CD, if you don't have it exactly there, you can't cancel a CD, you're penalized, you lose everything.
So I've got a question.
Sure.
Mr. Kuzic, so on page 7,
So,
the total, so 15,855.49 is the total this period, right?
that was just for the fourth quarter. Up above that, you'll see the first quarter was 18,000, the second was 16,000, the third quarter was 19, and the fourth quarter was 15. And those are based on depressed rates, and I expect that to be a lot higher now, because we're averaging 0.45, and you'll notice on our rates, if you go back a page, that it's been increasing for the last, go back to page 5, you can see the first quarter, we were like 0.27 for the second, then it jumped up to 0.45, and then fourth quarter is at 0.45, and I expect that to be
You
higher.
answered my question. I just didn't see the
Right,
other
I'm
quarters
sorry,
listed.
I should have pointed that out.
So I see them now, so.
But I expect this to be a lot higher, because now we can get into CDs, okay? And now they're starting to pay more, but you can't just switch everything to CDs, because you have all these buckets or targets sitting out there, and you can't pull it out there to put it farther out, because you have to pay for those items that are coming out.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question
May I see?
from Mr. Treasurer. What are we comparing this to?
The 90-day T-bills, this is on page 5, 90-day P-bills, the 90-day commercial paper, the township, our investments, and then the overnight rates.
I guess my question really is, if I'm looking at this, and I really want to understand, if you said first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, etc., okay? I'm comparing it to, is this 2017?
No, this is 2016. This is year complete 2016.
Okay, 2016.
Right.
Thank you very much. My second question is, what is the compare, if I want to know what it was 16 compared to 15, how would I know that?
Well, you would. I've only got the 16 because we're trying to compare investments for that particular quarter against other items that we could get at, because you got to remember, these funds, we can't put them out there for any length of time. We have payables every 2 weeks, okay? And then we have things where all of a sudden we buy vehicles, we don't know about it, so we have to have some surplus funds to cover things. Otherwise, we have to tell the board, okay, we can't buy that for another 3 weeks.
I understand that part of it, but my question really is, I want to know what you did in 2015 compared to 16. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Well, I could go back. I don't have that with me tonight.
That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at this, it doesn't.
15 is going to be a lot worse, okay? When I came in, we had CD rates, this is back in 2008, it was like over 2%. By the end of, maybe the middle of 9, I was lucky to get 5.5. It dropped that much, and after that, it just started dropping. Eventually, the CDs went away. I wouldn't even touch them, and I had to go to variable markets within the banks, which is variable, which is easier for us because we're protected better as far as liquidity. We could get at it very quickly, and we don't have to have a structure to monitor as much, but we never changed from the structure because we always want to be on track. So when we went back to the fixed items.
Mr. Treasurer, why is it you waited till the end of the year, to put out this report? Should this report be done quarterly, or how should it be done?
Normally on this particular report, if you don't have commercial paper, you don't have to report it at all, because it'll state in there that I'm listing all the CDs, we're listing all our investments, and technically there isn't any commercial paper in there, except for the pool investment, which is managed by a manager, okay?
But
And I only have to report it once a year, but I just thought it'd be easier at this point in time to recap.
so you're saying you only have to report to the board once a year?
Right.
Is that sufficient?
Well, we've recapped this, we went through so many changes, we can,
I think we have.
that's what the GASB 40 indicates, so.
I don't
And
know.
here, it also indicates that on CDs, I don't have to report that. Okay, so I want to report exactly where we're at, okay, with the things that we are doing.
Mr. Lehman, do we have an investment policy or?
Yes, we do.
For this, I mean, and we can pull it out, but I don't know if it's annually or quarterly or what.
I don't have it before me. In the past, Treasurer Guzak has reported some quarterly. This one is an annual with a fourth quarter in. I don't know if the policy specifically states when it will come before the board. I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Supervisor.
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Treasurer, this is, and I'm just making a comment to Al, this is a very, very thorough, professionally done investment report, and I'm absolutely blown away with the amount of information that you have in this. When I received this on Tuesday, I was dumbfounded, and I just want to thank you.
Gentlemen, I would make a move to accept the treasurer's annual report.
Second.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next item is board will consider a resolution for a 120-day moratorium to be placed on all property within the Technology Village area whereby no zoning applications or building permits will be accepted to allow for consideration and adoption of the proposed zoning regulations. Mr. Lehman or Mr. Laddie, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sorry for the last minute request, but we just received from Giffords Webster their proposed zoning regulations that will create the regulations that will allow the building or the development of Tech Village as presented in their master plan drawing and pursuant to the conceptual plan. It's important, I think, that we make sure that the vision of the property owners as well as the township be preserved until we can get those regulations in place to make sure that things go according to their very detailed and comprehensive plan. And so in order to accomplish that, we want to give the Planning Commission a chance to take a look at the proposed regulations and consider them. They will then make a recommendation to you. And then when you adopt them, then we'll have the regulations in place to have Tech Village develop the way we want to develop it. This is just a way to give them a little breathing room over the summer to consider and adopt those.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there's a motion, support. Any discussion? Mr. Mansour?
So of course I'm a representative to the board here on the Planning Commission, and you know, we meet monthly. We have additional meetings, and this Technology Village topic has been on virtually every meeting. So to have this come up the day of this meeting and ask for a 3-month moratorium which restricts our current residents from doing what they want to do in terms of asking for maybe zoning changes with their property is something that I simply would not support.
I think we probably have concurrence from the property owners involved.
Well, there have been conversation. I've had a conversation personally with Mr. Tubbs, and I also had we've heard comments from Mr. Nahas that they wouldn't object to this kind of moratorium. Tubbs is in favor of it. Nahas indicated he was, but he wasn't. They have not been asked directly. Nahases have not been.
So excuse me, but if all the property owners are in favor, then you don't need a moratorium because they simply won't do it. So I'm still you know, not understanding why something comes up hours before this meeting when the topic's been on the agenda for the Planning Commission and even this commission for months.
Because 8 hours ago, Giffords Webster delivered the proposed regulations. That's what caused it.
Part of the you know, the Tech Village, I think, you know, the uniqueness and why it works for our township is because of the contiguous nature of the property. There's not too many places in the county that have that large an expansive property along I-75 with the access that property does. And what we want, I mean, it would be very easy for, I don't know, I guess a speculator to come in or what have you. I don't want to speculate on what could happen, but by forging a partnership and I guess having the restrictions put on it, it kind of cements that relationship. We put considerable resources from the township into making this project move forward. We have conceptual plans. We've helped to market it, or in the process of helping to market it at a couple of shows. The township's put a considerable amount of time and effort into it. And so we feel as though that this kind of engagement puts a little bit more of a commitment to all three parties rather than just the township putting ourselves out there financially and commitment-wise, and yet not having a commitment from the two property owners to the point where they're willing to say, hey, you know what, we're going to put a moratorium on the potential sale, because we could get 9 months down into this and then sell it off to a factory, and then Technology Village is no more, yet we put all this work and effort into it. So that's, I've met the owners, and we've met, I think everybody's seen the owners here at the, representatives of them here at the meeting. I don't think we're doing any, putting them through any undue burden.
If I may, in a meeting in December when we rolled out the first part of the conceptual plan, and then again in January when we had Howard Cohn come from the Chesapeake Group to talk about the market assessment study, the owners were, or their representatives were in the room at that time. That was the first time that Attorney Laddie floated the idea of a moratorium on development, because the township has invested. We're paying for the zoning regulations to be written, and so we were investing in it as well and assisting them in marketing the property. Clearly not because we're altruistic, but because we know that it's going to add $100 million to our taxable value. But we already have started investing that money. We are paying Giffords Webster to write the zoning regulations, and at this point, if they were to decide to piecemeal off the property or start to sell it under the old zoning while we're in the process of rewriting the zoning, it will create an issue for both the township, the property seller, and any potential property owners or developers at this point. That's where the moratorium came out. Mr. Laddie did float it at the public meeting. One of the owners and the other owner's representative were both here and acknowledged that they would agree to that moratorium at that time. This was, we rolled it out today because we did really receive the information from Giffords Webster today and decided that we should probably act to get this moved out rather than wait for an additional meeting to get out.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
The way this reads is that no zoning applications of building permits will be accepted. So this, you know, there are other checkpoints in the system here in the process, so that if something does come through and it is a good idea, we have a chance to take a look at it rather than shutting off the flow here. And I mean, if we have sold this idea of the Tech Village up well enough to the existing property owners, it would seem that they would have enough belief in it not to piecemeal stuff off.
Yes, Mr. Guzette?
Well, the question I have, I just want clarification that we wait the 120 days, and then at that point, it's strictly for the Tech Village, because after that point, could they break it up at that point or not, or are those new regulations going to prevent that?
Once the new regulations are in place, and there is, ideally, that the concept for that plan to work is that there would be a master developer that would take control of the whole property. But if that doesn't occur, if the property was piecemealed, it could still be developed in pieces if we have the zoning in place.
Oh, okay.
Now, it's not nearly as good without a master developer, but it still could be good. Right now, it's a piece of R&D that can be developed however R&D wants to go. You could literally apply for a building permit. If you could create a lot and apply for a building permit right now.
I guess it's just a matter of whether or not we're comfortable with having a formal commitment that we're all in this together and we're going to commit our resources, or if we're committing township resources, we want more of a commitment than just we'll hold off until we see what happens. And I guess it's a comfort level of this township board, I guess, as to what level of commitment we're comfortable with. Whether we want to say, you know what, we're going to invest financially and continue to, just on a handshake, or we want to say, hey, if everybody's comfortable with this, which it sounds like they are, that we're going to, and we are putting, resources into the zoning, and we want somebody to put their foot in the spokes while we're in the middle of rezoning it and coming up with a lot of plans. So I guess it's a matter of comfort level. Yeah, Mr. Kent?
Through you to Mr. Laddie. Mr. Laddie, I don't think this is the first time we've done this either, right? I mean, I think on one or two of the PUDs, we've had a moratorium on building permits or whatever while they were getting the plans in place. Something just rings a bell.
We have done this in the past. However, the longest running moratorium in history was for the medical marijuana dispensaries. But
Yeah.
we have done them at different times for different considerations.
Yes. Okay.
You have a
Okay.
motion.
And supported. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
It's actually,
Aye.
it's a roll call.
Okay.
It passed.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Aye.
Mr. Mansour,
No.
Mr. Kent,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mr. Bennett.
Yes. I'd like to reach consensus on all of these things as much as possible. So, anyways, with that, we'll move on to our last item, and just briefly, if anybody has anything that they're hearing in the community that we need to address that we haven't, we do have our strategic agenda that we will be taking a look at that list and seeing what's next, and also what's timely based on what we have going on with our immediate needs, and put that on the next agenda for our future focus. But Mr. Massey and then Mr. Lane?
Hearing from the community.
Yes.
I'll be like the clerk. I am the community right now. The font size should be larger.
Oh yeah, we're gonna fix that, hopefully.
Okay.
We're just getting the bugs out of it. I appreciate it. So we just got this working this afternoon, and we're gonna tweak it and hopefully make it good for everybody to read. So thanks.
It's from the community.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Ms. Light.
I have a couple of things. Number one, I don't think the board knows, but I would like to let you know that Mary Ann Pallett in our finance department has notified us that she is going to be retiring June 6th. She'll stay on to, of course, assist us, but I thought you'd like to know there is a retiree that is coming up. I am getting more hopeful questions that Mr. Guzak and Attorney Laddie and our bonding attorney will be able to get 15 years on a bond, because the cost for the special assessment districts, I mean, tell me what we need to do or what road we have to go down. I'm going to keep, whatever you need as far as backing support to get that done, because it would really make a difference, and we have 2 petitions out there. Thirdly, Mr. Limita has indicated that he put together a package for the shopping centers meeting in Las Vegas. That's the 21st to the 24th of this month. I don't envision having a card table with pictures and paper there. Who is going to go there and be the spotlight for this particular development?
No one, and that's not unusual. What you have is they're 34 by 34 inch boards that are lined up to the convention hall, so that when the developers are walking through, you got your pitch as they walk through, and then there's 8.5 by 11s with the information that stays with those. They're reloaded for you every single day. It goes from May 21st through the 24th. We sent the artwork over, they create the boards. They put our 8.5 by 11s, they reload them every day. That was for $980.
Yeah. I want to also say that this portion of the agenda, I want to make sure it doesn't turn into a whole separate agenda. And basically, it's what we've got, hopefully not too late for that, but what it is what we've heard from our public, okay? So,
those are 3 questions I've had, so.
Okay. Somebody asked about Las Vegas?
Yes.
How they would know about it.
How? Because I even have had people come in and say they want to meet with Mr. Limita. I had one today that said that they know about this convention and want to talk about it, and I'm going, okay, talk to Mr. Lemata. I mean,
Okay.
I do get inquiries.
I would say anybody that has an inquiry, direct them to Mr. Lehman, whether it's a
That's what I've
contact
been
or what
doing.
have you.
I
So-
even gave you, I had you.
What I'm hearing in the community, the food truck event went very well. I think that the city hosted, and
Yes.
I think that benefits all of us when the city hosts something that is successful like that, that brings people together. I went over there and, gosh, I couldn't believe even with the cold, dark day it was. There was probably, Mr. Massey and I stood in line for a while, but there had to be at least 100 people in each of the lines for the food trucks, which just, I think, speaks volumes that, people are willing to get involved and participate in events here that we offer. So look forward to more of those. So with that, I think unless anybody else has any community comment, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.